Welcome to People Are Everything, the show that's a bit like Desert Island Discs. But rather than bring music, I asked my guests to bring the 5 people that have shaped the person they are today. And today I am introducing you to Lucy Pearce. Wow, what a conversation. Lucy is an author, a publisher. She's a podcast host of her own. She has a business called Womancraft. And as you'll come to hear, the 5 women that she has chosen are extraordinary. And we talk about all kinds of things and many things that I had never heard of or thought of. So I know you're going to love this because I did. And I learnt a lot along the way. And I've certainly found Lucy absolutely fascinating. So without further ado, please let me introduce you to Lucy Pearce. Hello, Lucy. Welcome to People Are Everything. I'm just very excited about this. And so I want to welcome you first of all. So how are you?
I am good, thank you. Yeah, really excited to be here. This, for me, is probably as close as I'll ever get to Desert Island Discs, where I get to share my favourite things. So,
do you know, it's funny you say that, because in the intro, that's what I say, because apparently people need a reference point to know what's coming.
okay.
And it is like Desert Island Discs, but without the music. It's like, rather than bring 5 people, is what I say. Rather than bring 5 songs, bring the 5 people and let's talk about you. So although you'll be talking about other people, we will learn something about you too. So, but before we begin, let's talk about how we've come to even know each other or meet each other today. Because I was reflecting on this. You know, I am somebody in the main that's quite grounded in, well, the ground. I'm a ground person. Even though I'm an air sign, I'm a Gemini. I think that's an air sign. Anyway, I'm a very grounded person. I'm someone who's very practical. I can put up shelves and all kinds of things. But I also have some really woo-woo friends who I adore, and they won't mind me saying woo-woo because that's what they say. And one in particular is a lady called Jo McClements, who I've known for 20-odd years and is one of my absolute favourite people. And she encouraged me to meet Callie White, who I've actually interviewed already. And at the end of her podcast, she said, you need to meet Lucy Pearce. So that's the breadcrumb, if you like, of how we came to be. And it was remarkable to me, really. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is to meet people who are quite outside of my day-to-day. Because my day-to-day is quite practical, to be honest. And I'm really hoping we're going to get into some kind of real spiritual stuff. Because what I can see from on the outside is that the work you do is very deep. It is very looking at the kind of the power of women in particular, the essence of who we are, how we're represented in the arts, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's my impression. Before we do anything else, I would love you to share with everybody listening and watching who you are and what you're all about.
That's really funny because some people who come to my books, I'm an author first and foremost, author of 12 books, and they're all books for women about the experience of womanhood, and they are nonfiction. And they incorporate elements of memoir, research, because I've always been a very, very academic person, a little bit of poetry woven in, other women's experiences. They're what I call genre non-conforming, so they don't fit very easily on any particular bookshelf. They fit on mind, body, spirit. They fit on archetypal psychology. They fit on self-help. They fit on memoir. They fit on nature writing. And it's really tricky to kind of pin them down to exactly what they are. Now, some people who come to my work say, I was worried it was going to be really woo-woo. And the reality is I'm autistic and I am not a hugely woo person. So people, because of the topics I write on, have an expectation that what I have to say is quite woo. What I have to say is certainly outside of our contemporary Western agreement on what reality is and what women should be and have been. Yes, I am quite disagreeable on those fronts. But I am very, like, I'm an uber geek. I love my Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. I love to do things practically myself. So, you know, most of my day is spent editing audio, editing for my podcast, editing words for my publishing house, Womancraft Publishing, comparing statistics, doing research. So actually, my life isn't very woo. So sorry to disappoint if you thought that's what you were going to get.
No. Well, listen, do you know what? And what is woo-woo anyway? It's kind of just tapping into our kind of higher self, shall we say?
And I mean, at the moment, the book that I'm reading is called Time Loops by Eric somebody, and it's all about how potential precognizance works. So yeah, I'm interested in stuff that lies beyond what current science says is the norm, but everything, like electricity 200 years ago, if you had talked about electricity, people would have accused you of being crazy, woo, insane. You know, if you talked about antibiotics 300 years ago, people would have looked at you like you were nuts. If you talked about theoretical physics and like quarks and stuff 150 years ago, people would have thought you were insane. Nowadays, we still have an awful lot that falls within the realms of what we can call magic or new age belief, which is perhaps stuff that science just doesn't get yet.
Well, I know I'm totally with you on that. And going back to Callie for a moment, the 2 times I went onto her workshops, as I've already said on my prior podcast with her, it absolutely blew my mind. And yet it made so much sense. Like she delves into the whole ancestral healing realm, and you know, particularly on the sort of burning times. And so much of what I experienced was so outside of my normal day-to-day or anything I've ever experienced before. But it was profoundly impactful and made sense, I don't know, bodily and intellectually for me. And, you know, you're absolutely right. What is today's kind of, I'm not even going to say unknown, because I think depends where you are on this. You know, is our future's, you know, day-to-day understanding of how we operate. And I'm doing this part. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what really annoys me is the way that as a culture we have historically discounted lived experience. If it's the lived experience of a minority group, so women, people of color, people of different genders, people who aren't the people in power, then it is very easily discounted. And those people are made to be seen as insane, stupid, they're locked away, they're punished, they're silenced. And we have a huge culture of that. We like to call ourselves, you know, kind of all forward thinking and exploring. No, we're not. We actually shut down the dissenting voices and have done for centuries upon centuries. And so for me, when establishing Womancraft Publishing, the number one thing was to give voice to women's lived experience, the experience that we haven't been able to share with each other about the very real parts of our lives, our experiences of our spirituality, our creativity, what it means to be pregnant, to give birth, what our menstrual cycles do to us. Like all of that has been silenced because women's voices were not the ones being published in our culture. We were being told about what it was like to have a period by a male doctor, but not by the women who actually experience what that is like from the inside. And so all of this insight, all of this knowledge has been completely left out of our comprehension in Western culture of who we are as a species, but also who women are. It's just been ignored.
Well, I mean, sorry to interrupt you there, but I'm smiling because you said things 100 years, 150 years. 2 years ago, people were not talking about menopause.
No.
At all. And if you did mention it to anyone, they'd say, oh, it's just hot flushes, isn't it? Yeah. And now what is there? 54 identified menopause symptoms, 34 of which are significant and common. And the rest are kind of a little bit on the outside of things. But, you know, brain fog, irritability, you know, as far as debilitating depressions, all these kind of things were never talked about until literally a couple of years ago. And here we are now talking about it so openly and so powerfully. I mean, I think I'm thankfully nearly through mine. And somebody asked me, how was it? And I said, well, parts of it were horrible. But now I'm starting to feel magnificent, I'll be honest. I feel
and we're not
so
allowed to
powerful.
talk about either of those bits. We're not allowed to talk about the suffering and the struggle because as a woman, women's pain doesn't count.
Yeah, we're
Women's
supposed to
pain
just stoically get through it,
is
aren't we?
ignored because it's not real, because no man has ever experienced it. Therefore, obviously it doesn't count. And then the other bit we're not allowed to talk about is the spiritual insights we might get, the resurgence of creative expression we might get, the changes to our libido we might have, because women aren't allowed to talk about any of those things too, because obviously they're different to men, so they don't count. So it's like...
Oh, I know, Lucy, I hear you. No, but I know one of your, we talked beforehand and we were talking about somebody who has a wolf in your life. And I have to say, there was two most powerful female moments for me. Was one when I gave birth to my two children. I had them both at home, and
me too.
Oh, wasn't it? Oh, it's just an incredible experience. And I honestly wanted to howl at the moon. I did. I felt so powerful, and I just wanted to howl. I mean, it was quite, obviously metaphorically, but I just felt incredibly strong. And then just recently, as I say, I'm coming out the other side. I'm mid-50s now, and I was like, oh my goodness, I feel so powerful. Like in every aspect of everything you just said. Like I'm completely in my body for the first time, because obviously the last 20, 30 years, it wasn't really mine. It was kind of being shared to make children and do what we're meant to do in our sort of reproductive cycles. But now it's all mine. And it feels fabulous. I'm not saying I regret any part of motherhood or my womanhood before, but my expectation was that I'd be done. You've like a chicken that can't lay an egg anymore. It's not much left for me to do. But actually, it's a third phase of life that I honestly, I'm excited about it. And I'm not saying that to sort of mask all the anxieties of getting older. I'm aware of mortality. I'm thinking about it. But honestly, I've never felt so physically strong and capable and powerful in my whole life.
And imagine if your experience growing up was hearing women's voices, women's stories as normal about what it was like to give birth, about what it was like to give birth at home, about what it was like to have your cycles, about what menopause was like, about what out the other side was. Imagine if you were steeped in that, and that was just your inherent knowledge about what lay ahead. You didn't have to be scared of it. There wasn't a vacuum of information. It was just, that was your normal. Imagine. That's what I'm hoping to create with Womancraft.
Well, let's get into. I want to get into your 5 in a minute, but just on that point, I often wonder. I mean, I'm just sort of go on a personal tangent now, but I really haven't experienced any of the negative sides of that. I was pretty much self-raised, and so all the kind of influence, I never knew my mum, you see. So any negativity towards womanhood, I didn't experience because I didn't really have one around me. So
not from your culture, not from your doctors,
Well, here's the thing. When I say self-raised, I mean, my friends who've known me for a long time, going back to the wolf reference again, like, you were literally raised by wolves. That's how they would describe me. And it's like, I think somehow I've managed to kind of not take any of that stuff in, all that negativity. I think that's why I had home births. The male doctor, you're absolutely right, said to me, I don't think that's wise. And I had no doubt at all that I was making the right decision for myself. And it never occurred to me to seek anybody's opinion about it. He just offered it. And I said, oh, well, that's actually what I'm doing. So I wonder if that's something about that. You say about, if I absolutely agree, if we'd heard all those things from our youth, or from our childhood onwards, how much we would be, embracing all these stages of women's lives. But I think I might be a rarity in that I certainly wasn't impacted by the negative messages as much. And I do attribute that with me just raising myself and working it all out and not having any kind of negativity in my life saying, you can't do that. So,
but then, okay, let's look at, so we're talking about exposure to women's culture.
Yeah.
When you were at school, did you study an equal number of male and female poets, novelists, artists? Because like my passion was the surrealist artists. Until about 4 years ago, I had never heard of a female surrealist artist. They just didn't exist in the books that I was researching from and the galleries that I went to, exhibitions. They didn't exist. You know,
Okay.
It was only in the end of my A-levels, we did Sylvia Plath. We did, who else did we do? We did Jane Austen. So we did a couple, but like the majority of the poets that we studied were male. The majority of the novelists we studied were male. And I was in a girls' school.
Ouch. Okay, well, Lucy, we need to move on to your story, because otherwise I'll talk for England. I should confess, I didn't really go that much. I mean, I'm talking about, I was pretty feral as a child. I don't, and if I did go to school, I know I was trouble. I was that kid that said, I'm not doing, I don't want to go in the typing pool. There was an actual typing pool in my school. Can you believe? And I said, I want to go in the computer room, which is these brand new computers that had just come in. They were called BBC Bees. And yeah, people in there who were born in the early 70s will know what I'm talking about. And only the boys were doing computing. Except all the boys plus one, which was me. And the other thing they tried to get me to do was, they had an actual flat made inside the school for home economics. And again, it was girls only. The girls learnt how to make the beds and do the ironing. And of course, I'm self-raised. So I was like, I don't want to learn how to do that. I've been doing that for years. So I want to do metalworks, plastic works, and woodwork. So again, all the boys did that plus one, which was me. So the things I did pick and choose what I did do, but beyond formal education, i.e. up to sort of A-level level, I really just picked and chose what I went to and actually studied. So I think probably from about 13 onwards, school was very optional for me. So going back to your point about was I aware of these influences, I think uniquely no. I really do think I just wasn't aware of it. And I am very aware of it now. I'm retrospectively looking back, and I'm most certainly an advocate for female voices to be heard, for female advocacy generally. And again, I talked earlier in podcast that I am for everyone. People are everything is a deliberate title. It's my passion, my interest is the human condition for all genders. So I'm completely on board that we are unique beings, each of us, and we all have a unique lived experience and need to be seen. And I also believe, and it's an and I believe that we still have a lot of work to do to bring things into balance so that women are not regarded as second anything. We're not second anything. We have as much to offer. And I'm not even going to say if not more. I think we have as much to offer as any other individual on this planet, as Lucy, as Julia, as whoever. And but we have a long way to go before that situation is as like you say, 150 years from now, they might look back and go, "You did what? You thought that women wouldn't understand their own bodies and it had to be medicalized by scientists. What were you thinking?" So a lot of things we learn through history looking back. I know we're going to have a great conversation because I think we're already quite like-minded, and that's what I love about this podcast. I meet the best people. So before we get into your 5, my other question I like to ask people is, how did you find choosing your 5? Because I think this is very revealing. I'm still trying to choose mine. I've been doing this for a long time now. But, how have you found whittling it down to the 5 people you want to talk about today?
So for writing books and stuff, I'm quite used to kind of having to find people that I want to focus on and kind of trying to keep that a narrowish focus. So trying to be disciplined on that. And for years, I have been practicing my desert island disc picks and, trying to whittle that down. Okay, so like I've got practice. So my 5 came quite easily, but I've got people like who should be there, like my parents, you know. So can I just sideline them and say, yes, they were very influential, yes, but they're not there, and that's acknowledged. There's I've got a couple of slash ones that I think I know which direction I'm going to go in, but I might suddenly kind of pivot at the last moment, because I've tried to make it people listening to this will be able to access. I don't think it's hugely helpful just having a list of my relatives. So I've tried to do that so that, you know, they're people that I've accessed that other people could access and be inspired by too.
All right. Well, there's so much about you already demonstrated in that last statement. So I love that. I love that you want to be helpful to those listening.
That's why I do what I do. I'm a resource collator. Is my main job, is trying to get as much information that is empowering, useful, and inspiring towards people as possible. That's what I do in every single thing that I do.
Good. Well, we need more Lucys then in this world. So all right, so let's get into it then. Why don't we start with number 1?
All right. Number 1 is Judith Dirk. And I think I'm saying her name correctly, because you're someone who was basically raised by wolves. I was raised by books. Obviously, I have 2 wonderful parents. I keep saying that, but I do. I am, as many autistic people are, I'm hyperlexic. I love to read. Reading is my way of gaining information, but it's also my way of soothing myself. And I'm really sorry, my husband's alerts are going off constantly.
Oh, don't worry.
I don't have to turn them off.
If it doesn't distract you, it doesn't distract me.
And so for me, that is just, you know, books are what made me. And if you were to ask me the 5 biggest books in my life, that I would spend forever trying to figure them out. But this first one is an author, and she is an author who was a major permission giver for me. So the book that most impacted me, I've read her other one, but it's called Circle of Stones. It's a really thin little volume. It's probably 70 pages long. And it starts with this inquiry. So each kind of 3rd or 4th page is an inquiry, and it's a kind of it goes on the same theme. So it repeats the question in a different way. So I'm going to read one of them to you. How might your life have been different if there had been a place for you to go, a place of women to help you learn the ways of women, a place where you were nurtured from an ancient flow, sustaining you and steadying you as you sought to become yourself, a place of women to help you find and trust the ancient flow already there within yourself, waiting to be released, a place of women. How might your life be different? And so that is the constant, how might your life be different? So this thinking of the way she joins the ancient past, which is both real and imagined, the fantastical and the real that we haven't heard much about, our reality now, which might be deficient of certain things, especially spaces to be ourselves, to be fully seen as we are, to express ourselves as we are. And then the future possibility of how might your life be different if you had that, if you created that for yourself and your community. So as you can see, that was a major influence for me and my work with Womancraft, with my books, is this taking past, present, and future, mixing them in a crucible and saying, if you have the tools, if you have the motivation, how can you make the future different from your present and your past? And what might that look like if you were to vision that for yourself? What do you need? She's not telling you what you need. She's asking you what you need, and then asking you to provide that for yourself and your community. So for me, that was massive. So that in itself. So I was newly moved back to Ireland. I had a new baby. I was a new mum. And as many of us are when we're new parents, feeling very like completely new identity, friends who don't have kids. Suddenly I don't have so much in common with them. What do I do? Who are my friends? What do I do with my time? Now I'm not studying and working. And so I went to the Lecture League, which is a breastfeeding support group. And there we sat in circle and we kind of asked our questions and we shared how exhausted we were and how frustrated we were and how in love with our little children we were. And there were several women there who I felt I really connected with. But I'm not a good let's go and have coffee and socialize person. That is not in my skill set. I need some sort of a structure in order to be able to function socially with people. So I was reading this book at the time and I printed out a shorter version of one of those little invitations. And I said, would you like to come to my house this time, this place, to create a women's circle, a place for us? And so they said yes. And we are now 17 years into that women's circle.
Love it.
And the format of it has, ebbed and flowed and changed and evolved. We've had new women join us and other women leave us, but the majority of us are the same people who were there at the beginning. And that circle, that space has held us through relationship breakups, loss of jobs, more children, all the things that happen in life. We've had a place that we've been able to show up to and feel like we were listened to, held, understood, and didn't have to justify ourselves, didn't have to explain ourselves, just that people got us and were there for us and would support us practically if we needed it, but really would just listen. So it was massive for me and my life in general on that. It was massive for the foundation of Womancraft, that kind of idea of creating a space for women, for the emergent of women's culture. And then also just the way she wrote. I describe myself as genre non-conforming. She absolutely is too. So she wove these invitations with little bits of poetry, of snippets of dreams, scenes from her life, and bits of research. So if you've seen one of my books and you like the style, that's where I first saw that style really lived out, that you could put many pieces that don't normally belong together. And if you weave them right, if you have the themes and the energy flowing through it, then those pieces can go together. And we can know with more parts of ourselves than just the head that we engage when we read. We're engaging the heart, we're engaging the energy, we're engaging the fantasy self, the dreaming, the unconscious self. And all of those parts of us then are brought to the book, which makes it a much more powerful experience than just the intellectual. But the intellectual has to be there too. The research has to be there. The way that we're taught to learn in our culture, which is through the rational mind, has to be there. That's an important piece of the puzzle. So for me, she really showed me how that could be done effectively.
If we go right back to the first time you read that piece, I've never heard that piece before. I felt actually very emotional. I literally, it did something to me, because I think for all my posturing earlier about I wasn't affected by this, it was leading to me saying, and so, I so would have loved female energy in my life. Everybody I was friends with back then were men and boys. I wasn't comfortable around women at all. I didn't really know how to be with them because I didn't have a mother, and spent many years wasted actually trying to understand all these feelings and why I was both attracted to and repelled by all the sort of women in my life. And what I took from that piece was, just imagine if you tapped into that, how different your life would have been. And I totally resonate with that sort of feeling of going into women's spaces, such as, post-birth mother and toddler groups and things like that, can be incredibly intimidating. And again, if you're not comfortable with women's energy, and if I link back again to what Callie was saying about the brokenness of women's connection in the burning times, we were taught to compete with each other, to lie to each other, to protect ourselves from each other,
to betray each other,
and betray
to
each
betray
other.
your sister to protect yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was talking to a guy. I keep mentioning him. I think he probably feels he's I've got some kind of I don't know. He seems to pop up a lot in my podcast, but I met a guy called Jindy, and I talk about him quite a lot. And what fascinates me by him is he's doing men's circles for safe spaces for men to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only just occurred to me in what you just said was that women need safe places to speak amongst each other. Because again, going back to all that kind of betrayal and conditioning to the scarcity mentality that women have, finding an all-female group to feel comfortable in is incredibly difficult as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few safe spaces for women to talk openly and honestly about how they truly feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, we lie to each other about how our motherhood. Oh, I'm loving it. Isn't it amazing? Oh my God, it was awful. Parts of it were so terrible, I can't tell you. And I kept that all to myself.
Mm-hmm.
What it is to go through menopause. God, we're finally talking about it honestly. But also, I've never really experienced girl gangs before. I've never been in a girl group. And I find it very, very difficult. I find it incredibly difficult to feel totally relaxed in all female groups. And most of my friendships, when I think about it, my female friendships are individuals. They're not a group.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I have the same. And from growing up, I would always have a couple of really close female friends. But if I hung out in a group, it was always with a group of boys because the boys were safe to be with. They wouldn't get at you for this, that, or the other. You could just be part of the group and do something. Whereas the girls would be cliquey and they'd be mean and they'd be judging you on this or that or the other that you weren't even aware of, especially as the autistic kid. And that you'd be like,
what's going on? Yeah. No, Lucy, honestly, I hear you. And I wonder if there's, it's talked about enough that because people automatically assume that women are good at talking. We're great communicators. We had to learn to communicate because we have to raise babies that don't even speak yet. So we're marvelous at seeing, interpreting and, human behavior. We're hardwired for it. Otherwise our babies wouldn't get their needs met before they could even speak. So we're really good at communicating. But with everything else that's come into society, absolutely, we are not trusting of each other. And we're always credited with being able to speak our issues. And therefore, this assumption that men's mental health is affected by lack of communication. And women may have mental health issues as well, but it's not to do with being able to communicate our feelings. But actually, it is also probably under-discussed that yes, men bottle things up, and I so wish that was different. I talk to my son all the time about open communication. But also, I think men do know how to find each other in safe spaces. I think they know how to make football clubs, and they know how to make team sports, and they know how to play golf, and they know how to band together in safe spaces where they are maybe mildly competitive, but not in the same way that women can be. They don't look to kind of tear into each other and fight for the scarcity of the resources of this world.
But I think that's because they don't have to fight for the resources.
Oh, absolutely, of course, it's a privilege.
Because
it's definitely a privilege.
Men tend to be believed. I wrote a whole book called Medicine Woman about women and the medical system.
Yeah,
and how women's pain is not believed.
Absolutely,
how women. It's like there's study after study done on women's pain being underestimated by doctors, even though they have been told by the woman how excruciating it is underestimated. Women showing up with heart attacks, not tested for heart attack, whereas men automatically are, because women are disbelieved because we cry too much, or we're too emotional, or we're too dramatic, and therefore what we have to say isn't believed. Whereas men don't have to go through that, jump through those hoops of belief in order to get to diagnosis or treatment or support in the same way.
But isn't it interesting?
Believed.
No, I know. And I we could do a whole podcast and never get through the 5 because we're just going to stay with Judith. But I do want to get through the 5. But it's like, and I suppose what I'm really trying to say is, however we get there, let's try and work out how we can communicate more kindly and supportively of each other as fellow women. How to hold each other up, advocate, allyship, everything, whether it's in the workplace, in our home life, in our personal, everything. We need to prioritize that. So good old Judith, I like the sound of that. I'm going to look into that more. Absolutely speaks to me. And as I say, when you first read that first piece, I was like, wow, that is something.
It still gets me. Like it was,
it's powerful.
Almost 20 years ago, I read that book. I've revisited it many times. And each time I read it aloud to myself or out loud to share, it pricks those tears of deep longing and recognition.
Loss. Yeah, yearning and loss and longing. I totally can relate to that. Well done, Lucy. I like that. First one is a tick. Let's go to number 2.
Okay, so number 2 is going to be Leonie Dawson, who is an Australian woman who I've never met in real life and has just had this very strange connection to my life in many, many ways. So she is a blogger, first and foremost, an author, a creator of a women's entrepreneurial school, should we call it that? I think it's now called the Shining Business Academy. She keeps changing the name of it, so I'm not sure what it's called exactly now. So I first came across her back in the days of the blogosphere when I read Christiane Northrup's book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, which was one of the seminal texts. Sorry, not seminal equals semen. Very influential texts of my life. It's there in our language.
I've never thought about that before.
So, and she refers to this, she has this paragraph about the creative rainbow mother. It's an archetype. She writes about how she struggled with motherhood, especially early motherhood, and felt this deep longing to do her work as well as be a mother, and this constant tearing between those two parts of herself, which a lot of her friends didn't experience. And I was like, yep, me too. And so she quotes this passage from this book. So I managed to find that book, and that didn't have anything more about it. And I was like, oh no. And then, so I put it into Google. And the only thing that shows up is this blog post from this Australian woman called Leonie Dawson, who says she too feels this creative rainbow mother archetype and just, writes a little bit about her life and how she experiences. I'm like, yes. So I follow her. And then that's it. Like, it goes dead. There's nothing else about it. And I hadn't done much work with archetypes before. They hadn't really meant much to me. But this was like a light bulb went on over, this is my experience. This has been given a name. Why the hell isn't there more out there about it? So I wrote the book. So that was my first book, The Rainbow Way, Cultivating Creativity in the Midst of Motherhood. Because when I had just given birth to my son, and I felt this whoosh of creative energy, which for the previous probably 6 years, I'd managed to tamp it down and try really hard to be normal while I was doing my degrees. I mean, I don't do normal very well, but I tried really hard because I had identified that my mental health stuff and my creativity were part of the same thing. So if I shut down the creativity, then the mental health stuff would go down too, and I would be normal and I'd fit in and happily ever after. So something about pregnancy and the hormones of that said, you're not doing that anymore. So I requested that somebody get me The Artist's Way, because I was aware of this as a book that people say was life-changing. This is how you access your creativity. So I read it, and you know what? There were so many men in it. There were very few women, and there were almost no mothers. And so she was giving all these suggestions, and I was like, but I've got a tiny baby. I don't have a day that I can go and have an artist state. I don't even have half of an hour that I can have an artist state. What do I do? What about me? I'm here.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wrote my book. My book is like The Artist's Way, but for creative mothers who are feeling that urgent yearning to create, to express themselves, to be more than just mothers, and don't have the time, the energy, the space. How do you do it?
Yeah.
And so I reached out to my heroines in my real life and in my that I've read, and I interviewed them and I said, how do you do it? What do you do? So that was the first of my books that combined my experience, archetypal psychology, research into the struggles of creative motherhood, why women, especially mothers, are totally left out of the art world, and the lived experience of real women and how they manage it. And so Leonie was a guiding light for that. So I reached out to her and I said, would you write the foreword to this? And she did. And I joined her business, I don't know what you call it, like her academy. It's an online business school specifically for women, because business skills have usually been the domain of men. You know, you go to business school, it's very left-brained, and it's very logical and rational. And a lot of women get really freaked out about, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not this, I'm not that, but I really want to do something, or I really want to, have an income stream, or I really want to self-publish, but I don't know how. And she is just such a good permission giver. Like she's like me, she's resource heavy. So she reads, she processes a huge amount and then splurges it out in a far more accessible way that doesn't feel intimidating, doesn't feel scary. So you get all the kind of the nuts and bolts that you need. And as a doer and as a geeky person, I love that because it's very practical. But she also gives you the spiritual encouragement of, you can do this, I see you, you've got a big dream and you're making it happen, and really just talking to that imposter syndrome and that negative self-talk that can happen for women. And she packages it in this most beautiful rainbow color, hand-drawn stuff, which again speaks totally to my aesthetic. And it was this woman who is a multi-millionaire from what she's done, doing it on her terms, working 4 days a week, having her kids, doing what she's passionate about, stopping, reinventing herself, doing something else. And she was a real permission giver for me in how to do business in the world as yourself, as your strange, interesting, quirky self. And so many of the tools that I've learned about self-publishing, marketing, creating all the things that I've created have got their roots in learning the skills from her, but also the encouragement from the way she teaches them. And then, so as if that's not enough, then we were struggling for several years with my middle child, my daughter, not knowing what we were struggling with. And out of the blue, one day, Leonie's newsletter comes along and she identifies herself as autistic. And I was like, because all of her checklist of things was like, every single one of them was me. And I had, with my daughter, I'd been kind of reading around the subject, everything I could. And all the books were about boys and how autism shows up in boys. And that wasn't my daughter. So I discounted that because it was like, well, that's not what we're dealing with. And this was like, I need to look again at this. So that started off the root of my daughter's diagnosis, my own diagnosis, my mother's diagnosis, all these things that we'd struggled with over the years that nobody had been able to say, this is what it is. This is what you're dealing with. This is why this happens. So for me, it was just understanding the way my brain worked, the things I struggled with, and why I had struggled as a human being for so long, she opened that door for me too. So that's a lot of permission given for one human being in one lifetime. And I've never met her.
Oh, I love that. I mean, the fact that you haven't met her and she's had such a profound impact on you and your daughter and others, and changed the trajectory of your thinking and your work. That's pretty impactful. We all, any of us sort of givers, which putting us both in that category, Lucy, that's what we dream of, isn't it? That somebody, that the work we do is going to have an impact like that. There's a couple of things that came to mind when you were talking. And again, I keep having these like first thoughts listening to you, which is really great. I mean, again, it's another reason why I keep doing this. There's a lot of talk about, at the moment, we're all struggling under the yoke of patriarchy, men and women. I mean, patriarchy doesn't serve men, and it certainly doesn't serve women. And what popped into my head when you were talking about archetype was that the idea of matriarch and matriarchy doesn't serve anybody well either. It's this idea that we have one idea of what womanhood is, or one idea of what motherhood is, and yet, as we've talked about already, we are multifaceted, complex, unique, sentient, extraordinary individuals. Our gender is very secondary to I always say I'm Julia first, and everything else comes later. And it just struck me when you were speaking, it's like this expectation on what motherhood should look like, perpetuated by all of society, women particularly, is really unhelpful, and could really could do with being dismantled the way that we're trying to dismantle patriarchy right now. But we're not talking about it so much. We're not talking about dismantling matriarchy and expectations and archetypal expectations on women. So I just wanted to I'm going to ponder that a bit more, Lucy. I'm going to take that away and think about it, because I think there's something in that for me to really think about in my own personal development and how I interact with the world. So thank you for that. That's really that's set me off. But listen, let's get on to so let's go to number 3. Let's hear who's third on your list and see what other light bulb moments you can offer me, Lucy. No pressure.
So next I am going to share Elisa Starkweather.
Okay.
And it's very important to her that it's capital A, capital L.
Great name.
It's not that unusual in America, but it's unusual, I think, to spell it with a double capital. Anyway, so just so you know. So Elisa, I'm trying to get where I first met her. I've never had an official mentor, but I've always longed for a mentor, especially during my 20s when I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd trained as a teacher, and I was very academic. I'd intended to do my PhD and then got pregnant while I was doing my teacher training. So it was like that door had closed. I'd always been very creative. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I really longed for a mentor, just to have their hand at my back and to kind of be able to ask them questions when I felt really stuck. And Elisa has become that for me in a very unofficial, and I consider her my fairy godmother. So Elisa Starkweather is the founder of the Red Tent Temple movement. Okay. So red tents are an idea which a couple of women had at the same time, which I always find really interesting, that, an idea is out there in the collective unconscious, and a couple of people can kind of ping into it at the same time and bring it through them in their way. And she was one of the women who did that. So I first came across her when I was researching my... Now, it's tricky. I have 2 first books. I have The Rainbow Way, which was published by a publisher. I did the whole hoo-ha of getting a publisher for that. But whilst I was waiting to find a publisher, I wrote what was a small ebook called Moontime, all about understanding your menstrual cycle and living in harmony with that. And that was just going to be a promotional ebook for my website. I sent it out to a few people and they were like, now this needs to be a real book. So that was my first self-published book. So it came out before my proper first book. So just to clarify that. So I found her as I was researching Moontime, and I was researching red tents. I had read the book The Red Tent by Anita Diamant, but I'd never, I was just discovering that they were now there in real life. Women were creating women's spaces for menstrual rest and being together. So women's circle spaces, but connected to the cycle. And so Elisa was one of the very few people on the internet who was writing about this because she had created one. So I approached her to ask, could I quote from her website? Because there was nothing in print about red tents. My book was the very first book in print that mentions real life red tents. So she says, yes, we strike up a friendly, kind of email interaction. And then I ask her if she will endorse the book, and she does. So forward a few years, she puts out a beautiful documentary about red tents. And then she is, then I have a massive run-in with somebody. I start a red tent here. And as things can do in women's spaces with women involved with each other, big drama happens. Which I feel hideously attacked by, and it shuts me down. I run the hell away from this red tent and just am totally just destroyed by how I have been talked about to my face and my lack of integrity, and it just destroys me. And Elisa sees a blog post that I write about this, about 6 weeks later after it started to settle a little bit. And she reaches out and just really offers me tools and support and great kindness in this. And just a reflection of this happens in these spaces, and I wish it didn't. And, just that solidarity. Then a couple of years later, my book, Burning Woman, comes out. And it was and is my biggest book. It comes out and really ignites stuff. And that is both very validating. Pink, the rock star, sees an extract from it in the Wee Moon Diary and puts a post out just on that and shares my words on her feed. It's mentioned by CNN on their thing about burning women and witches and stuff. So it hits the mainstream, which is exciting and terrifying. And Elisa really sees this and really wants to just support and champion me to her community. So she invites me over to it's kind of like a festival, but not really, an event that she is curating, and she thinks it's the last time she's going to do it. And there are ceremonies there are workshops, there is an enormous fire. And she says, I want you to be there to share Burning Woman with my people, but also just for me, just to really support and give back to you so you get nourished by this. And so I go, I meet her in person, and part of this, so a big part of Burning Woman is this desire to burn, with this feeling of needing to burn with passion, but this terror of what happens if I do, what happens if I bare myself, I express myself, the fear of being burned by other people, by people shaming you. And the historic thing of how that has happened to women through the burning times, and it continues to happen. If you want to shut down a woman, even today, you call her a witch. I had a example of that from, while I was writing it, Australian Parliament. One MP was accused of being a witch by another one to shut her down and to shut her up. It was like, this is still happening now. Women who are outspoken, going against the grain, saying what is not wanted, being too big for their boots, being too loud, will be shut down. And so part of this was this little ceremony at the end of the book. It kind of takes you through the various stages of desiring to burn and be seen, and also the desire to hide from the fear and the shame. And this ceremony to get naked and literally dance around a bonfire, to embody that thing of the sensuality of being fully in your body, being seen by other people, and the fire and that experience of just like expansiveness. So I did that ceremony with a couple of people here. But she invited me, and they had this massive, there were about 200 women, massive bonfire, several women drummers. And she told me at the beginning of the festival, no clothes off, can't do that, there's neighbors. And then about halfway through the fire ceremony, she said, Lucy, now's the time. And I was like, what? She's like, you can do it. You can get naked. You can go around the fire. And I thought, no, but she said no. And part of the book is about being a good girl. You know, being the good girl, making sure that everyone approves, you don't get in trouble. And so I wanted to be the good girl with my mentor. I was like, no, it's okay. And I did another kind of dance around the thing, and she stopped me again and said, no, now, Lucy, now. So off came the clothes, and half of the women there got completely naked, and we danced around this fire, women all ages, all sizes and shapes and colors, and we just danced together around this fire, and it was wonderful. So that's Elisa, and she's continued to, you know, just have her hand at my back, and I've had my hand at hers, because she's somebody who has trained priestesses for years, who has led women's work for years and years, like 30 plus years, and yet has this huge block with writing. Like, she's a woman who should have several books out, but something happens when she sits to write. So that's my gift to her in this world, is I encourage authors. I practically help authors. Several of our authors at Womancraft are neurodivergent, and I can help people who are dyslexic, who are struggling with block, to get their way around it so that they can get something out, and that something can become a book, because I can support that shaping once there is material out. So that's, you know, that's my bit of our relationship over these years.
Amazing. Oh, there's so much I want to talk to on that, what you just said. So first of all, congratulations again on sharing something I've never heard of, which is red tents. That's not something I've ever thought about, but actually, again, makes perfect sense. There's a lot going on in women's bodies every single day, and we go through an awful lot on a cyclical level, and sometimes we just need to rest, and that's not acknowledged at all in anything in terms of our working weeks, the way our life is structured. Nothing is ever linked to the sort of ebbing and flowing of that throughout the month. The getting naked thing is quite interesting, because this is a bit random, but what struck me when you were speaking was how art and culture and sculpture and religion and all the kind of long-standing images of female power are really only linked to motherhood or in accompaniment to a men's strength. And I'm going to say something quite obvious to most, but like completely took me by surprise. But my son and I went to Rome for the first time. I've never been, and he wanted to go. So we went to Rome. And I can honestly say, in this course of 5 days, I don't think I've ever seen so many penises. It was I got
so angry. I went to Rome with my family last year. It was the patriarchal, we're going to make things in stone, and they're going to last forever, and there's going to be big phallic things there, everywhere. And you're going to look at it, and we're powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And that celebration of male masculinity and genitalia and the power of nudity, and look at us open-chested, open-bodied stances, and yet, I don't know, I feel like I've grown up in a place where women's bodies are there for the male gaze, for sure. Men will be are very keen to see us, but we are not celebrated in that way. We are hidden away. Our bodies are, in some cultures, even considered dirty during our menstruation. And that for women to just, tear off their clothes and dance around a fire pit, is so primal and so powerful. But I would imagine quite very intimidating for men to observe.
There weren't any men there.
No. What I'm saying is, if they did, they would be like, and that comes back to the whole kind of how do you shut down a powerful woman? You call her a witch, or I mean, something that really upsets me. I do understand the context, the original context of the Karen thing. I think it was very specifically about race when it first came out, but now it's basically any woman that wants to speak up about if she's angry or upset about anything.
Yeah.
And it's a patriarchy thing, because there's no male equivalent. A man speaking up for himself is not called a Ken.
No.
Or a, whatever, Karen, Ken, I know, alliteration. But do you know what I mean? There's no equivalent of it. So I love the idea of all these women just tearing off their clothes and going, yes, look at this lot. Hey.
I say that at the beginning in Burning Woman, where I speak about W is for witch. I'm going to have to paraphrase myself, but I say, when we're sitting learning our alphabets with our primary school teachers, A is for apple, W is for witch, but P isn't for pedophile and R isn't for rapist. So the powerful, dangerous woman is right there when you're learning your alphabet and associated with what to look out for and be scared of. But we're not told about the actual other people we need to be scared of, who probably you're going to be more likely to come across in your life.
Yeah, back to the archetype thing, isn't it? The kind of the pointy nose, black hat kind of character of your nightmares.
The powerful, dangerous woman.
Yeah, as a witch. Interesting. Okay, well, again, here we go. I've learned something that I've never heard of before, so well done for that, Alisa. Okay, who's number 4?
And not woo, right? The majority
not woo
of what
at all.
I say is
No, it's a woo free zone so far. So let's see where we go.
Okay, you want woo free? Virginia Woolf.
Okay. Well,
so obviously haven't met the woman. So out of all of the kind of the historical creatives that I had knowledge of in my early life, obviously Sylvia Plath would have been another one, and I could probably put the two of them there side by side, but Virginia Woolf has an additional thing, which is why she's my person. So both of them who were women who really struggled with mental health issues, really struggled with the need to express themselves, the need to be heard, the need to be taken seriously. As writers, first and foremost, not women writers, but writers in their own right. And yet they were always judged first and foremost as women. And they really felt that. And that was my feeling when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. It was that feeling of, it's really interesting. You said something earlier and you said, I see myself as Julia first, everything else second. And I fully understand and acknowledge that. But that's not how you are seen.
No, absolutely.
You are seen female first, then people will know who you are, your name, your identity, And judgments are made on that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And that is what makes me angry, because I am an extremely intellectually capable human being. And I felt that I had to fight to be seen in that way. And that made me mad, because I wasn't having to assert myself because I wasn't smart enough, because I was the top of every class I've ever been in. I've won every prize that there is to win in everything that I've ever done. So it's not that I was incapable. There were assumptions made about me purely because of the body that I showed up into this world. That made me mad. And so I felt that anger, that frustration as a driving force in Sylvia Plath and Virginia Woolf's work, that need to be taken seriously. And so, it's tricky now because the world that I work in, I write in, as you identified at the beginning, can be seen as woo. I long to be taken seriously. And yet I'm wanting to be taken seriously by the people that I am critiquing, by the culture that I don't fit into, by the culture that I am critiquing and saying, look at these enormous gaping holes that you have that you're unwilling to look at, the places where the voices are missing. So how can I fully be taken seriously by something that I'm deeply critical of? And yet that is the enigma at the heart of my work, this longing to be taken seriously by the establishment, the very thing that I'm critiquing. So it's an interesting one, but I see that fire in Sylvia Plath and I see it in Virginia Woolf.
Well, I'm now...
how Virginia Woolf responded. So that is something that both was the driving force of their writing and their careers as women writers, but also it was the thing I would say probably contributed hugely to their inner struggles, to the depressions that they experienced, that feeling of despondency and hopelessness and frustration at not being heard and seen.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's all of what their mental health struggles was, but I'm sure it contributed. And so Virginia Woolf's response to that was, first of all, to write about it. A room of one's own and money is what a woman needed. I mean, my God, no woman or man had ever said that. And there she was saying in really blatant terms, this is what a woman needs. And so for me, the times when I have felt powerless or unable to express myself, I realized that I didn't have a space for myself. I had said, oh, no, it's okay. I'll just work in the little corner of this room and the family can have all this. And I was like, no, hang on a second. I need a space for my own. I need to value my own creative time, energy, and physical need for space where I can shut a door and I am not somebody's mother for that time. And men throughout history have had the luxury of that. They've had a wife or a housekeeper or a daughter who would bring food to them, who would do the daily chores, who would clean the house, who would mind the children, and they could close that door. And when they were in their room, they would be the creative genius that they are. But women have not had that privilege, and it is a privilege. And so for somebody who did come from privileged means, Virginia Woolf, to say this is what all creative women need, it was just so powerful. And then her response to it. And I feel like at this stage, we may have lost every single one of your male listeners who think I am a man-hating harridan who is slagging off men. I am very happily married. I've been with my husband for 25 years, and we run our business together. He is my right-hand man in Womancraft. And Virginia Woolf started Hogarth Press to publish her own work, as well as that of her creative friends and contemporaries, with her husband, Leonard Woolf. And that partnership of your domestic partnership becoming a creative partnership and your financial stability, to me, is a very powerful example of working together on many different levels to create a life, to create a community and a culture that you long to see and be a vital part of. You're not just creating it for other people. It's also putting your work out there too. And so for me, that partnership between herself and her husband, creating that, was a real permission giver for me.
Yeah. And again, there's so much to sort of unpick. It's like, of her time, how extraordinary that would have been as a voice cutting through. And for her to have the foresight, if you like, or the courage to take that forward and do her own thing in her time. But actually it just made me realize that how far we haven't come in some ways, because I still feel that I'm very good at finding a space for myself. I'm very good at that as well. But you're right. It's not gifted or granted. I created it. And, I look at, I don't know if this is, I'm going to be a bit cautious with what I'm about to say, because I don't want to be overly generalizing, but you can't help it, can you? When you're at, I'm very fortunate. I belong to a wonderful club around the corner from here. It's my favorite place. It's my second home. And it also happens to be, kind of in a golf club situation. So I go there for the gym and the swimming, but there's a golf club that's involved. And you see a very typical scene is that of a weekend, you see the couple, they arrive and they've unpacked the kids from the back of the car, and it's, all the paraphernalia that comes with two small children. And you see the mothers going off to the creche and, or doing something with the children. There's sort of artwork and whatever. And you see the men going off to the golf course. And it's like, I'm looking at that scene and I'm going, I see why you need that, Dad. You've had probably, if we're going to be archetypal for a minute, you've been to work all week. You're pretty tired. You need some space. You need some place to recuperate and just kind of be yourself for a few hours. But then I look at the mother and I say, well, so do you. But, it rarely, it's not typical for women to ask for that space away from their own children and to be their full self. So I do understand, that we still have a long way to go before we get that balance right. And this idea of you said, have we lost all the men listeners? Well, I hope not, because I imagine most men who are listening to a podcast called People Are Everything have a certain sensitivity around the power of partnership anyway. They're not going to pick up or tune into a podcast like this if they don't have a sense of that, if you can appreciate everyone around you, that it's going to you're going to have a more enriched life. And I think about all the men in my life, barring a handful, and they are open to evolving in this area. But most of the men that I have very good relationships with are very partnership orientated with their partners, with me. I keep referring to my son. He's very, I've got a sensitive person as well. He's really insightful. He really wants to get under the skin of things and understand things. And I remember saying to him when he was very young, I said, if you find a way to really understand women and how they can enhance your life in terms of friendships, relationships, colleagues, and really get to understand how women think, you are going to have a very enriched life. And I feel the same way about men. I spend a lot of time talking to men. I really like male company. I find if you create the right sort of circumstance and you make them feel safe, that you're not going to attack them, they will open up about all kinds of things, honestly, and tell you truly what it's like to be a modern male in today's society. And I just think there's so much power in that, so much power in creating, you talk about permission, creating permission to just drop all the like I say, the matriarchy and patriarchy, shackles, and just talk openly and honestly about what it is to, like I say, to be Lucy and to be Julia. So no, I just thank you again for that insight. And,
I mean, one of the lovely things about, I always want my work to be seen as permission giving and opening doors rather than shutting things down or telling people what they can't do or shouldn't be or anything like that. And so I'd say it's about 14 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, that my husband and many of the partners of the women in women's group decided that they wanted something like that for themselves. So they created men's group.
Wonderful.
And they saw how we came back, we would leave the house and we would be exhausted, we'd be grumpy, we'd be cranky. And we would come back full of energy and life and affection and enthusiasm, or able to work things through that would previously been butting our heads against. And they wanted that for themselves. And so they've been going 13, 14 years and have created it in their own image and done what they needed to do, which is to have a space where men can connect really vulnerably, really honestly, without having to be like the one who's kind of in charge and the one who knows what he's doing, and actually say, this is real for me. This is what I'm struggling with right now. And to have the support of other men in that. So
I like that.
So there's that. Yeah. And then I'm part of a gaming group, not computer gaming as in board games. And I'm the only woman there. And so, I get my space with men, which is totally different and lovely because none of the other women are interested in that. So,
but my final, I just want to say one last thing about the sort of how men might be feeling. I honestly think men know when you're on their side anyway. It doesn't really matter. We are going to be vocal. Of course we are. We want things different for our future generations. I have a daughter as well. I want things different for her. And there is much work to do in the world to solve some of the sort of really difficult challenges that women specifically face. But I think when you're in the company of men, they do know that, where they can feel comfortable and safe. And I take it as a great compliment when they are open and honest with me, that they feel that I'm somebody who has the appreciation and can at least empathize and sympathize with some aspects of what it is to be a male today. Because I think, we are starting to hear much more from men who say, it's really hard for me too, I know I can't undo thousands of years of issues, but that wasn't me personally.
No, exactly.
I'm a good man. I'm trying to live a good life. I'm trying to do the right thing. And it's hard. And I think the more we can create spaces for men to talk like that and not just, thinly veil it around, oh, did you see the match last week? And, all the stuff that they do kind of to test each other's well-being, but not really get into things. I think it can only be a good thing for society. Happier everybody is going to be good news, isn't it? So good. All right. Well, we're solving a lot of stuff today, Lucy. Okay. Let's see. Number 5. Let's see what's number 5 has to
my
teach
fifth
me.
person is somebody who I know in real life.
Okay.
And she is my next door neighbor. Okay. But she is also the founder of Ireland's most recognized cookery school. And she is one of our most recognized cookery book authors.
Wow. Okay.
And her name is Darina Allen. She is our equivalent of Delia Smith over here.
All right.
And so my family came over from, on my father's side, came over from the UK pre-Second World War, and didn't like the way things were shaping up there, were pacifists, and wanted very much to have no part of that, but instead to be a community of free-thinking people who were living close to the land. And so my grandfather came over and made friends with a gentleman farmer over here called Ivan Allen. And together they lived in a house and had their 2 families together in a house. And, kind of did that for several years until the Allens decided that they were going to start a hotel, which became Ballymaloe House. And so my family were bought out and moved to the next village along. Ballymaloe House is now one of the most recognized hotels and restaurants in Ireland. Anyone who's been there, we've had Johnny Depp and big American people, as well as lots and lots of foodie people from around Europe and the US. And so Darina married Timmy. Timmy is one of the Allens' children. They had 6 children, and they inherited the house which is next door to our house, which they, when their children were little, turned into a cookery school. So it's a big old Georgian house with lots and lots of land around it. And so there was, they started the farm. They were farming. So they had been farming for years and years, which is where my grandfather had been working with them. They'd been farming tomatoes and mushrooms that had been shipped over to the UK. And Dorina and Timmy decided they wanted to do something with this land and really teaching people. So they started a little farm shop, and then they started a little cookery school, which grew and grew and grew. And Dorina is one of the most enthusiastic and passionate people you're ever likely to come across. When she latches onto something, she has to use her platform to share it with the world. And so any food issue that comes up, she will be in the media making sure that everyone knows about it. She's somebody who is a passionate teacher. And as I said, I started out as a teacher. That was my training that I did after my degree. And so as somebody who teaches, I've always been just so inspired by her. She is just so effusive. She's so wanting to give you all of the information. She talks at triple speed. She's got her, she inspires my glasses choices. She has, big colorful glasses on, and just is so herself in her teaching and so generous in her teaching. And she has created this business where she lives around the land that she loves and the things that she loves, and shares it so generously with the world. And she did that whilst her family were growing up. And I too have seen that as an example of, you don't have to choose. You don't have to do one or the other. You don't have to either have the kids or start your business. You can be a female entrepreneur. You can work. Again, she is in partnership with her husband, Timmy. She and he have planned and done it all side by side, hand in hand. And so just seeing that model of how, as a woman, you can, because she's the visionary of it. She is gets the idea, makes it happen, which you don't see that often around you, of somebody with that sort of creative vision and creative power to make their visions come true, like that. And then by doing that, influencing the state of their little bit of the world. And that is very much what she does. So, she's also big into supporting local producers. That is a major part of her thing. So back in the day when I was trying to figure out what my business was going to be, I had a little chocolate business. And so they really supported that. She championed me in that. When she was starting out they did a literary festival, and she made sure that she invited me to be a speaker there, because she knew I was self-publishing, and I was a food blogger as well at that point, and she wanted to help give me a platform. She's someone who very generously shares her platform as widely as she can, so that as many people as possible get the advantage of her spotlight that she has managed to build on her platform. And that generosity of sharing and bringing people onto the stage with her is something that I really have taken on board, as well as being passionate about stuff and making that stuff actually happen. The drive that this woman has is just extraordinary. And then the other thing, they're big into philanthropy, as is, and I totally forgot to say this before, Leonie Dawson also. She very much modeled for me, both of them have, how you integrate giving into your business model. It's not an optional extra afterwards, but actually supporting organizations, supporting causes, both financially and with your platform, is something you weave in, you bake it in from the beginning. And that's what we've done with Womancraft. We very much, we give a percentage of our income every year, regardless, to Tree Sisters. Several of our books have a percentage of the royalties that is distributed amongst organizations that are connected to that book. And we just do that as standard. We give away ebooks via the World Reader platform to people in developing countries, so that they have access for free to all of our books. so to help literacy programs. So that sort of thing has just been vital to me, that as a business, it's not just about making the most money you can for yourself. You are always part of different communities, and you have a responsibility to those communities, both financially and by sharing the platform. And so that very much is what both Leonie and Dorina have done for me, is showing me how, as a woman, you can do that.
Yeah. But I love the model of it. I mean, look at you and your husband, and this idea of going into business partnership as a family. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because you're together, you're building something for your future, for your children's future. It's so obvious in some ways as the best model for building family and family prosperity, and kind of, has got so many positivities about it. The modern way is to split us all up, isn't it? Into all the, put the kids over there and the dad over there and the mum over there. And somehow they're supposed to cobble it all together into a home life. So, there's so many positive things around that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, I mean, when you were talking about the philanthropy side, all I kept hearing was, Rachel Reeves saying growth, growth, growth. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, there's plenty of ways of showing growth. And growth, in terms of always driving for more and more and more, actually has completely counterproductive impacts on you individually and a society. What if we strove for personal growth, for family growth, community growth, well-being growth? Let's all just go for growth, but it doesn't have to be bottom line. There can be
Dorina
other things.
Is somebody who shows that. Like Dorina, she realized that the local school had no cookery lessons. The kids didn't know anything about cooking. So she's offered her cookery school for all the local schools to have a session each year, so that the children get to pick the vegetables, go and cook those vegetables and learn something about cooking and the land that they live on. And then she has funded, every school around here has chickens and a little veggie garden. So children are hands-on day by day, understanding where their food comes from. And she's also the woman who drove down the road, saw that the council had sprayed some horrible glyphosate thing and everything had died off, and immediately stopped me on the road. I was driving down and said, Lucy, what is this? We must do something. She was on the phone to the council. She was getting me and everyone she met those 2 days on the phone to the council. She put it in her column that she has every week. It never happened again.
Yeah, well, she sounds a real powerhouse. I like the sound of her. I'll have to come and meet her one day with you as well. Listen, it's these 5 women are, obviously extraordinary, and they've had a massive impact on you. You can tell. You feel, the way you speak about them with such passion and energy, and you've already shared with us how they've shaped certain aspects of you. If you had to kind of pick one or two specific things that you can take from these guys collectively, what would it be? Would you say that you now embody in yourself and the way you are?
I think most of all of them have taught me that you can make stuff happen, that you have the capacity and potential to make things happen, to make the changes that you want to see happen, that transformation, that growth, that new culture is within your grasp if you are willing to take that leap into making it happen. And it takes a lot of energy and it takes learning all sorts of skills, but that you have the potential to make and grow things in this world, and to partner with others, both your personal partner and your communities, to make even more of that happen, that you're not alone in it, and you never should consider yourself alone. That more brains, more hearts, more wallets equal more change.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Okay. Sign me up. I feel like I'm already doing it, to be honest. But listen, okay. So the format really then pivots to my next question, which is, you've had all these extraordinary women influence you, and you've had the support of great men around you, and obviously been influenced by them too. And, you sound to me anyway, like somebody who's always open to learning something new and, is very tuned in. So in terms of taking this all forward and, how you are personally going to take all this knowledge, this kind of awareness that you have, can you talk about what's next for you in that way? What do you want to take forward? What do you want to pay forward into society and into the world?
Well, I mean, that's what I do every day. Every day I wake up and I do my work. That is the work that I'm doing. Every book that I write is only written because I want to share the knowledge that I have accrued and the experience that I have and the experiences that other women have told me privately that I want to be public knowledge. The women's books that I publish as part of Womancraft Publishing are the books I want to see out in the world, the books that are missing from our bookshelves, the voices that haven't been there. And so for me, every day is that. I mean, something I did also learn from Dorina is, and from my own father, and this is not something they were intending to teach, was the importance of enough.
Oh, yes.
That the creative urge, the desire to make change in this world is not human. The thing that comes through us is bigger than us, and it doesn't care about human limitations. It doesn't care if you're exhausted, if you've burned out, if the children have been up all night, if you've got a tummy bug or a migraine. It doesn't care. All it wants is to see itself out into the world. And so as a human being, and especially as a woman, because chances are you've got more care duties on your shoulders, you're probably dealing with more health issues, then as a woman, you need to be the one to set boundaries, to say, this is what I can do. I am not going to make myself mad or sick. I am not going to sacrifice my children or my family or my partnership on the altar of doing, because doing gets applauded, doing gets money, doing gets recognition. But actually, we need to have enough time to rest, to be, to recover. And so I have learned from a couple of people who didn't manage that. And I know, and my body has taught me through burnouts and through 3.5 years of almost constant migraines, that actually I need to set my own boundaries. And the creative impulse won't do that for me. So I have to care for myself as I create, as I transform. And there is nothing admirable about killing myself in the process. So I've specifically 100%. Kept Womancraft small. We are a small business so that we can all do the things that we're good at and that we love, so it doesn't become large and corporate and impersonal and like anything else. And that requires saying no. Saying no to a lot of submissions, no to opportunities that come our way, because actually we want to do what we can do with the greatest integrity for ourselves and for what we do. And we are limited because we're human.
Oh, hear. I talk about enough a lot at the moment in that capacity too, which is knowing when you need to rest and when's enough for you, because like you say, there's so much to do. And if you are a creative, and I put myself in that category, it is tempting to kind of rush and squeeze it all in. And I don't know about you, but I'm very aware of time. I'm just like, oh my goodness, how much time do I have left to make the impact I want to make them to do the things I want to do? And often joke that I wish I had several parallel lives that I could flip between so I could experience it all. I literally would love that. But obviously this is only a short little vacation that we're all on. And, we have to choose carefully what we invest in, what we invest our emotional energy in, our physical energy, but most importantly, our time. So I totally understand that. And the second part of that word for me is the attainment bit. when is enough enough? Materially, in terms of, I don't know, achievements and things like that. I don't think it's any coincidence that I'm probably at my most productive and most effective right now, and both in my sort of day work and my sort of pursuits. And I think it's because I don't know, feels to me like I found my groove. I found my peace. I found my ability to kind of recognize when to rest, when to work, what levers to pull, what are the most effective things I can do, rather than what's the most amount of hours I can dedicate to something. So I think that's probably called wisdom somewhere along the line. I've got wisdom now, Lucy, which is good. Another wonderful benefit of post-perimenopause is you get full of wisdom. So here, even more to look forward to. But listen, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, many things actually that I've either not heard of or maybe vaguely knew about, but certainly have a different perspective. And it's also triggered a couple of unique thoughts for me. So I really appreciated that and really enjoyed it. Now, I am going to put on you what I put on Callie, which is how we met, which is, who should I meet next? Who should I talk to next, and why? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, it's tricky because Dorina doesn't do podcast interviews. I'm not sure Elisa does. Leonie is very hard. I'm getting her for my podcast, which is a major coup.
It doesn't have to be. It could be. It could be anyone, anybody.
Okay. Yeah, and I can't really get you Virginia Woolf either, I'm afraid.
But you know what? Like, people say to me, what's the ambition for this? Are you going to keep just going, till you get to sort of speak to all kinds of noteworthy and, celebrated people? And I said, no, I just want to speak to a lot of people.
I know who you need to talk to.
So who is it?
Dee Mulrooney.
Okay.
She is an incredible woman. She is an artist, visual artist. So if you looked at Dee Mulrooney on Instagram, she does kind of challenging sacred feminine art that includes the kind of the menstrual cycle and stuff. Like she's visually fascinating, but she has an alter ego called Growler, who is the 82-year-old mother of God in vulval form. So she dresses as the vulva, as the Virgin Mary, and she talks in this working class Dublin accent, and she goes around challenging the patriarchy. You need to talk to her.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Do you remember at the beginning of this podcast, I said something like, I want to meet people I wouldn't normally meet in my realm? That would be it. Dee is someone I ordinarily wouldn't meet, and I already feel slightly intimidated, but I think
is fabulous.
I think I'll probably be fine.
She was one of my most popular guests on Creative Magic. She doesn't do that many podcast interviews, but she is so generous with her time and her insight on the creative process and on patriarchy and on class and include. She's a teacher, and she is she's an interesting lady.
All right. But you know what, people are I hope it's the same for you. I hope it's going to be the same for Dee. But when I speak to people who have very big lives in terms of their creativity or their output, what I'm hearing back is it's nice to stop for a minute and think about the 5 people that have influenced me, as opposed to me talking about what my work is exclusively.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And we have talked a lot about your work and how you think, but it's interwoven into the celebration of those 5 people. And I think that's what I'm enjoying most about this structure.
It's infinitely nicer that you're not having to be kind of self-promotional, or like the worst thing is you've written a book and people are like, so what's the book about, Lucy? And I've told you how complex my books are. It's like, where do I start?
Yeah. But isn't it fun to stop for a minute and actually just try and tell all of those stories through the experience of other people and and how you you've experienced those people. So I hope that Dee will embrace that and talk as much about the 5 people that have influenced her as the subjects that matter to her. So, but it's been a delight today, Lucy. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. As I say, I really enjoyed it. I've learnt a lot. I feel very underread now. I mean, I am looking at my bookshelf and it needs some work. But thank you for the recommendations.
Bookshelf singular.
Oh, don't. No, now you're making me feel even worse, Lucy. Come on. I know. I'm thinking of, I don't know, what do? People go and buy, bookshelves and fill them through books they've never read. I will promise I'm going to read more, and I particularly.
There's no obligation to.
No. I feel
one way into the world, and it's just, it's just my problem is the opposite. Like I have 8 bookshelves, 10 bookshelves, and I still have piles of book everywhere with no shelf to put them on.
Okay, all right. Well, you shall be my inspiration for being better read.
Don't go down that route.
But listen, thank you so much again, and all the best with everything. Sounds like you live a full and creative life, and it sounds marvelous. So carry on, and keep on putting all that good stuff into the world. Thank you very much. Take care. I absolutely loved that conversation. I found Lucy totally fascinating and not at all what I was expecting. I think going into that conversation, perhaps I may have thought that it might go into some kind of ethereal space that I may find uncomfortable, but she was firmly rooted in the pragmatic and, of course, totally open to some very, very interesting new ideas. So if you enjoyed that conversation, please rate, review, and share with friends. And if you'd like to share your 5 people, please do get in touch. Until next time, all the best. See you. Bye-bye.